So I've been reading Myth of Male Power. I'm probably 20-30% of the way through at this point. It is a bit repetitive, and I'll start with my criticisms. It does get a bit repetitive, but I think that's part of the value of the book. For those of you who didn't check out what we did last week, it's a book by this guy Warren Farrell, and the thesis of the book is that we recognize the ways in which, or many of the ways in which, women uniquely struggle and suffer in the world. Like, they're more likely to be victims of rape. They're more likely to deal with workplace sexual harassment, those sorts of things. We don't recognize the ways in which men uniquely suffer, and it has led us to incorrectly assume that we have this patriarchal society that favors men, when in reality, what we have is a society that favors the men and women at the top and screws a lot of the people at the bottom. And they can be they can be guys or girls or whatever. So anyway, I've continued reading it. It is a bit repetitive. That's one criticism. Another criticism that I have of it is that, and this, we talked about this with Cowspiracy, how like he'll use arguments that aren't valid for the point that he's trying to make, and it unfortunately for me discredits much of what he says. So
you're saying he'll say something, it's not a valid argument, and you go, well, did I just miss why the other arguments were invalid?
So for instance, and I wrote one or two of them down, he says that he uses the amount of searches that Google returns when you type in a topic as a proxy for if this thing is being important or is addressed. And it's just like, when you search men's health, you only get this many reviews, but when you search women's health, you get this many results. And I just find that to be like so stupid. Like, who cares? There's got to be a better way to prove this point. Another thing that he says is that he talks about war, which is a big part of his argument. I think is well founded, that we send young boys to just die and fight for us. But he phrases it often in such a way that it's like, young men go and fight and women stay at home and are protected. It's like, well, not entirely. Like, sometimes those young men conquer a town and kill all the women or rape them. Like, he can sometimes minimize. And I don't think he does as a human being, because I've seen him talk about it, and I don't see this. But this book was written in 1993, and I do get the sense that he feels like he's fighting an uphill battle, so he has to not talk about the problems that women face, and sometimes just says things like treating war as an exclusively male-dominated suffering event, when in reality it's brutal for everyone, and men exclusively have made up the frontline fighters, which is a fair point.
Yeah, but when you get to a village and you burn it down, mostly the women are there because the men are all fighting.
Yes.
And what's interesting? This is actually a point I was thinking about for a Charisma on Command video. When you present in an argument, let's say I'm trying to persuade you of anything. If I present you with 4 arguments, you will just attack the weakest one.
Correct.
So people think that when they're trying to prove that someone's wrong, or a bad roommate, or a Republican or Democrat is bad, the more things they can throw at them, the better. So if I can list 10 reasons why you're a bad person, that's better than 4. But actually, the person is going to try to fight you because they don't want to be a bad person. They don't want to be wrong. So the weakest thing you present them with is exactly where they'll attack you, and they won't address your strongest points. So it's interesting that you raised this with the book too. It seems like there's this misconception that more is better when trying to be persuasive. And actually, I think stronger is better.
I think that there are cases where more can be better, where you can overwhelm someone who is not digging in their feet resistant with just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
I think more works when the person wants to buy your narrative. So for instance, if you're trying to cancel Jake Paul, and you just go, Jake Paul did this thing that's bad. And they go, okay, that's one bad thing. You go, he did this thing that's bad, and also these 5 things that aren't technically bad, but they're just kind of shitty.
Yeah.
To someone who already wants to not like Jake Paul or hates Jake Paul, it's like, oh, there's 6 really strong reasons to hate Jake Paul. So I think it helps with confirmation bias.
Brian Callen's Me Too moment was a lot like this. Though there was one like, he drugged my drink and raped me. And then there were others that he propositioned me for sex for money. He was creepy. And I was going like, why are these even in here? These have...
why are these lumped together? Because I'll tell you, when you drug someone and rape them, it's a crime, and you go to jail for it. And when you make a joke at a comedy club that's inappropriate, you don't go to jail.
Or even if you proposition someone for sex and you mean it sincerely, it's like these aren't in the same ballpark.
Yeah.
But the reason is, if you are likely to buy that, the headline says, Brian accused by 4 women of sexual assault related.
Yeah, if you're not arguing against someone who's going to think critically about it, I guess, then it's helpful. Because you can just say, 5 allegations of misconduct.
Yes.
One of them is a horrific allegation, and the other 4 are not. But you don't necessarily need more than the headline.
If you're predisposed to believe that, the 5 feels good to you. Yeah. So,
but I do think if you're going to sit down with someone who's intelligent or going to be critical of your argument, that the weakest thing you present is what they're going to attack.
Sure. I think that's a correct way of breaking it down. But so other things that I liked a lot of it though. So he gave me really what he does is for this section is he shines a light on the left side of the bell curve of men. And it is incredible how I didn't know that like garbage men is the 5th most dangerous job in America. Apparently in 1993 at least, I don't know if this is still true, like they get maimed constantly
By the garbage truck?
by the garbage truck and other things, like stories of battery acid falling out on them. Their backs get screwed up. They are the butt of every joke. And it's not even jokes. Like, what, do you want to wind up as a garbage man? Like,
yeah, that's the elementary school teacher threat.
Yeah.
If you don't pay attention, you'll be a garbage man.
And he's like, even within the thing, if there are garbage women, they're X times more likely to be driving the car rather than in the back handling, which is where the danger tends to occur and happen. And he I think effectively, though repetitively, but sometimes you need repetition, goes through a variety of different jobs and circumstances where it's the truth. Yeah, we put men in dangerous positions. That's what we have done throughout history. When there's a war, when there's dangerous work to be done, we put young men there first. And we bait the hook, oftentimes in war, with promises of you'll be a hero or prestige or you're a tough macho guy. And so that was one thing that I'm going to try to keep my eyes open more. He talks about how there are invisible men, and I can totally relate to this, is that you do not see those people. Like when you walk down the street, one of the things that can happen in LA is that homeless people can become invisible if they're not screaming at you. Like you can just get blinded to it, and you'll notice somebody walking past you and you'll make eye contact, but there's an invisibility that occurs with homeless. And I think he correctly points out that same thing occurs with the guy fixing the power lines, the garbage man, the steel worker, mining, all of these kinds of things. And I don't encounter miners, but they're overlooked. Their problems are not discussed ever. And mining is apparently like the most dangerous thing. Truckers, for instance, this is another one that he mentions. And I'm curious if you find this to be true. The representation of truckers in media is often stupid or violent. So if you think of like Man of Steel, like Clark Kent walks into a bar and these truckers are like cursing him out. And
interesting.
I'm trying to think of a trucker that I've seen in media that has been at all aspirational, admirable, or likable. And I can't think of
I think in movies, that's right. For me, when I think of a trucker, I think of just brutal hours. I think of the guy that was in the magazine where half his face is completely wrinkled because the sun only hits one side of his face.
Yeah.
So when I think trucker, I just think, brutal hours, brutal days, not a fun job.
Yeah.
Trying not to fall asleep at the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't necessarily think dumb or violent, but I do think hard job
and ridiculously necessary, like until we have autonomous
for
cars for now, right? Until we have autonomous cars, and at which point then what happens? But he does, I think, fairly shine
they're the guy Wolverine fights in the bar. It's always a trucker,
some jerk trucker who is screwing with a superhero. You know what I mean? Yeah. Some arrogant, dumb, violent trucker. Or in Dumb and Dumber, it's the jerk in the diner is a trucker.
Yeah.
Which I thought, I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Do you think truckers are pissed about this? Or do you think it's the water that they live in?
I have no idea. They do not tweet about it, as far as I can tell. His point is that men have been taught, one of the weaknesses of this whole thing is that it's very appropriate, he says, that women have complained about the unnecessary roles that they've been forced into now that technology can free them from the constraints that we used to have a couple hundred years ago, that they no longer have to be the homemaker and they no longer have to be all of these different things. And men haven't complained. And that's partially because culturally and historically, you don't complain. That's a sign of weakness that you don't want to display as a man.
Well, I think we talked about this a little bit off air. That's because, and I don't know if this is cultural or biological or what, but there's a strong desire by most men to appear strong, to appear stronger than they are. Mm-hmm. There's a tendency, and maybe this is changing now in the young people, but you don't want to appear sad. You don't want to appear hurt. If someone hurts your feelings in a breakup in high school, you don't show it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you get punched, you're supposed to act like it doesn't hurt. There is an instinct, but I don't know if it's a biological instinct or one built in us from society to try to front as strong as we can as people. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so complaining is the direct opposite of that. And I think that's why a lot of guys don't complain until they're only with their guy friends and drinking. Because at that point, there can be a little bit of bitching about stuff.
Yes. Sure. Yeah, I think that's true. And that is a drawback, at least in the 2021, of the traditional male gender role, is that when there are problems, you're not, and we've talked about this in the past, how you see more depression in women than in men, but there have been people that have theorized that male depression, it's just called alcoholism. It's just called domestic violence. It's just, like it finds other outlets than I'm sad. It comes out in I'm angry, or I'm going to hurt someone, or, I kill myself, basically. Yeah. But I was never depressed at any point. I just killed myself.
Yeah. No, one thing we've talked about, I'm bouncing around a little bit, but the other thing is the ability to control a man by telling him that a certain behavior makes him more of a man versus less of a man, or a more desirable man to women versus less desirable. That's something I noticed in my past. Yeah, you could so easily manipulate me by just saying that something made me masculine, or that something was not masculine. So when I was reading a book that said that being masculine meant no matter how, I don't know how do I say this not offensively, no matter how your girlfriend is behaving, your job as a man is to be the rock with which she can rage against.
This book is The Way of Superior Man, and that like most wonderful things, I think we would agree with like 85% of this book, and which is why we just took it all wholesale. But one piece that you're describing,
well, it's just like, what men do when things are crazy around them is be the person that stands against the hurricane winds and just lets them bounce off him. Mm-hmm. And that led me to stay in a bad relationship, because I thought that's what a man did. Yeah, and
it's like, of course she's going to be the hurricane.
It took me, I had to reframe that. I was like, no, a man is someone that demands behavior from the people around him up to a certain standard and then leaves when it's not. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. Now I can leave because I've reframed what being a man is. But what I couldn't do is just go, okay, this might be what being a man is, but it's not fun. I'm not enjoying this anymore. So I'm just going to go be feminine over here and happy. Yeah. I still can't do that. Yeah. I had to reframe like, oh no, it's cool, because being a man means that when someone doesn't act the way that you expect them to in a relationship, you leave with your masculinity. So yeah, I think that's often, you see it all the time in Twitter bios or Tinder bios and stuff, like, oh, if you're not man enough to deal with the fact that I have, and then just a list of terrible qualities.
I mean, think of what a draft is. Like, he didn't point this example out, but if you remember when Bill Clinton, and George Bush went to the National Guard, dodged the draft. Bill Clinton ran away. That was a smear on him. Mm-hmm. When Hillary Clinton, who is the same age, ran for president, the same position, and didn't fight in Vietnam, nobody said a fucking word.
Yeah, of course.
and I look, and the fact that had never occurred to me, I was like, oh my God. Like, and I do like, oh yeah, George Bush, rich kid, went to the National Guard. It's like, and again, I'm not saying that we should have gone to Vietnam, but like, where was his wife at the time? Why no criticism of her? Did she put her life on the line? Of course not. Like, why would she? So I think he correctly points out this expectation that we have as men as to lay your life down and be a bodyguard for society and women. And that if we want to really reassess gender roles, I think he correctly points out that this bodyguard position is one that we should question collectively. Now, that's not to say, and I'll go with the best, if there is a war, you want the most capable physical specimens who are most likely to win the war to be there. That wasn't how we did it. We have female firefighters. We have, and there's, we have.
Well, his point is not one that people would necessarily accept, or his ideal is not one that everyone agrees with, though. His ideal is, let's just treat everybody the same, basically. Let's just not even take gender into.
I think it's a bit more nuanced than that. It's to recognize that the gender roles that persist today had extreme relevance for a large portion of human history. Like, it made sense to go, oh, you've got a penis, you should probably be out there hunting. Okay, you don't, you should take care of the home. Like, hey,
oh,
there's
but I'm
a war,
just saying
you should probably going, and you should probably not be.
What I'm saying is there's men and women who absolutely still want the traditional roles.
Sure.
There's men and women who want, okay, man, you go make the money, you be the bodyguard. Woman, you take care of the kids, take care of the house. There's people of both genders that are very happy to sign up for that still. So not everyone has adopted this. What's his name? Warren Farrell?
Warren Farrell, yeah.
Like, not everyone's adopted that mindset yet of, let's just treat ourselves as identical in terms of our interests and capabilities.
Yeah, I agree. But he's really moved me. I guess one of the big shifts that I've been thinking about this week is I've really been questioning that. So, because here's the thing that you don't realize is that what if you could pick and choose, which is really what the women's lib movement has attempted to offer women, is the ability to pick and choose which role you'll play. You could still play the female role, or you could play the traditional male role, or you could do a hodgepodge of both of those, right? You could be the high-powered executive, but you could also, love to cook and clean and those sorts of things if that suits you. So what I've been going is, look, I do like earning money and providing. And if I were to be married, I'd be happy to be a single income earner. But if I was like, if someone breaks into my house, do I want to be the bodyguard? I'm not sure. He raises the interesting point. And I don't know that I could ever let go of the cultural conditioning. And I imagine if I love someone to that degree and I had kids in the house, I probably would lay down my life for them. But I don't have that, so it's tough for me to say. But he does point out that we often talk about how stay-at-home moms, they're not compensated for their work, and it's a fair point. Like, they do all the cooking, the cleaning, the this and that, and they don't receive a salary, and they're not recognized economically. But he also says that men in relationships are socially expected to play the role of bodyguard, such that if you are attacked or somebody comes into the house and there's a baseball bat, you don't grab the bat and give it to your wife and say, "Go get him, honey." I'm going to stay up here, and if I hear something, I'll scream and call 911 and then maybe dip out the window. Whether or not you have training, you're going down the stairs with the bat, and it's probably nothing. But if it's someone, you're going to slow him down while she escapes. And when the Titanic went down, it didn't matter who could swim better. Women and children got on the boats, and men didn't. Is there a reason for that necessarily in that particular circumstance? No, it's that there was this whole cultural thrust of the disposable sex in terms of laying down their life, not in terms of whose opinions matter more. And I think there's fair criticism that the opinions of women had not been held as in high regard throughout history. But when it came to who's going to die, the answer was men.
Yeah. Well, sorry, but I'm saying even in the even the people I know who identify as feminists, most of them still expect that the man will pay on the first date, and probably more than half of the subsequent dates. I don't actually see a lot of people pushing for this Warren Farrell ideal.
This is why he wrote the book.
Going 50-50. That's what I'm saying. It's I don't actually, if you want that, it sounds like he has a lot of good prescriptions and ideals for how to do that, but I don't see men or women really wanting that. I think a lot of men like pursuing masculinity and being rewarded for it, even if it's just with a pat on the head from society. And I think even the feminists I know would be turned off or offended by being asked to go 50-50 on a first date.
Or if a man gave them the baseball bat while they were in the house together. I mean, they might say that they want that level of equality, but there's no way they would stay with someone who they didn't feel would protect them in the event of, or at least attempt to, in the event of some sort of an attack.
Yeah, there's just still, even from the people who identify as feminists that I know, there's still a expectation that first date, the guy's going to get the wallet. Sure. And I think what they expect to do is say, "Oh, no, I'll split it." And then they expect the guy to say no. And if he says, "Yeah, that sounds like a great idea," that's not that's not what they're solving for. Yeah. So this guy's, I guess what I'm saying is this guy's prescriptions are kind of for a solution that people aren't asking for.
Well, yes. And he starts by saying, this is look, if you want equality and you want to really question gender roles, this is what it would entail. It's got to cut both ways in terms of advantages and disadvantages. And I think that's the fairest point. I'm not saying that I can totally release the masculine ideal that has been instilled in me since I was a little boy and let go of that. But to recognize, I think, that men and women face different challenges, which the other will likely only know intellectually and never have to experience. And to say that history is simply a patriarchy is to miss that there were also tremendous advantages of being a woman that are taken for granted in current discourse. That's the big thing.
Got it. Makes sense.
Hope that you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to see more like this and have us do more podcasts, we are 100% funded by our generous patrons. And if you'd like to contribute, there's a link in the description, and we'll have one pop up on the screen right here so that we can do more podcasts where we have fun conversations and hopefully some deep ones like this. Either way, hope that you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.